Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we're going to do something a little different. We are stepping back in time, not to the grand palaces or the legendary battlefields you see in the movies, but to the quiet, often uncomfortable, in-between moments of a life lived on the edge of history. We're going to explore what it was really like to be a mercenary in the ancient world now. Trust me, being a real mercenary back then was nothing like the glorious, action-packed fantasies you might have seen. Mostly. It was more about the dust in your throat, the ache in your feet, and the constant, low hum of uncertainty. But even in those mundane moments, there's a strange, compelling rhythm to discover. So, before you get too comfortable, maybe take a moment to tap that like button and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel, and it lets me know you're settling in for the journey. Also, if you're listening live or right when this video comes out, let me know in the comments where and when you're tuning in from. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. All right. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan if that helps you relax, maybe grab a warm drink, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the familiar, unwelcome pressure on your shoulders. It's the weight of the leather, stiff and molded to your shape over countless days and nights of wear, smelling faintly of old sweat and tanning chemicals. It presses down, a constant reminder of what you are and what you're here to do. You shift slightly on the hard-packed earth, the rough wool of your tunic scratching against your skin beneath the armor plates. It's late evening, or maybe just before dawn. The air has that cool, damp bite that sinks into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. The sky above is a deep, star-dusted velvet, indifferent to the small collection of humanity huddled below around you. The camp is settling. The crackle of a dying cooking fire nearby sends weak tendrils of smoke drifting through the air, carrying the faint, greasy scent of whatever was left to eat tonight, probably thin gruel, tasting mostly of ash and necessity. You can hear the low murmur of voices, a quiet argument somewhere to your left, a shared laugh that cuts through the stillness before being quickly hushed. The restless shuffle and occasional soft whinny of a horse tethered further out reminds you that you're not the only living thing enduring the damp and the weight. Your own breath puffs out in a faint cloud before you, a tiny, visible sign of your presence in the vast, quiet night. There's a dull ache in your knees, a familiar companion from too many nights sleeping on unforgiving ground. You clench your hands, feeling the worn texture of the leather gloves cracked and split in places, offering more historical accuracy than actual protection or warmth. You can smell the faint, metallic tang of rust on your own spearhead, leaning against a makeshift support beside you. Everything feels used, worn down, including maybe, if you're honest yourself, you're not here for glory. You've seen enough skirmishes to know glory is mostly a story told later by people who weren't there, usually with important-sounding titles. You're certainly not here for fame. Most of the people you fight alongside, you barely know their names, and they barely know yours. No, you're here for the coin. That's the simple truth that weighs heavier than the leather on your back sometimes. Coin buys food. Coin buys a night under a proper, albeit cheap, roof in winter. Coin buys another day, and you're here because, frankly, what else would you do? You learned how to handle a spear because that's what was available. You learned how to march because standing still meant starving. There wasn't a comfortable apprenticeship in a trade waiting for you, no plot of land to inherit. This life, this collection of waiting and walking and occasional moments of stark, brutal action, is the only path that seemed open. It's a life of anticipation, of knowing that at some point the quiet will break and you'll earn your pay in sweat and risk. For now, though, there is just the waiting, the damp, the smell of wood smoke and stale sweat, and the simple, undeniable weight of your world pressing down. The stillness around you feels fragile, like a thin sheet of ice over deep water. You know with a quiet certainty that this moment of peace is temporary. Soon the orders will come, the camp will stir with a different kind of energy, and you'll be asked to move, to fight, to earn that precarious living once more. But for now, you just listen to the night sounds, feel the cold earth and wait. All right, let's pull back the rough wool blanket of night and step into the often less than thrilling reality of a mercenary's day when there's no immediate battle or march. Settle deeper into your seat. Section 2. The first hint of dawn isn't a glorious sunrise over a noble objective, but rather the slow, gray creeping light filtering through the gaps in the tents and between the bodies sleeping or pretending to sleep around you. The symphony of the night camp shifts from quiet rustling to the less pleasant sounds of waking, coughs, groans, the clinking of metal as someone else starts stirring. You push yourself up, feeling the stiffness in your joints, the cold seeping up from the ground you slept on. The air still bites, but it carries new scents now, the rekindling of a few fires, the smell of wet earth, and the unmistakable, overpowering aroma of unwashed humanity. The morning ritual is simple, repetitive, and utterly necessary. First, the gear. Your life, quite literally, depends on it. You check the leather bindings on your shield, flexing the wood to make sure it hasn't warped too badly in the damp. Your boots, patched and repatched so many times they're more history than leather, need checking for new splits before they cause crippling blisters on the march. You run a thumb along the edge of your blade. Not to admire it, but to feel for nicks, to gauge if it needs another session with the sharpening stone later. It's a quiet, meditative task, this tending of the tools of your trade. Every small repair, every little bit of maintenance, feels like a tiny act of defiance against the constant decay that tries to claim everything out here. Food, such as it is next. Often it's just whatever lasted from the night before, cold and congealed. Maybe hardtack so stale it could break teeth, dipped in lukewarm, questionable water. Cooking something hot requires precious fuel and effort, usually only attempted if you're in a relatively permanent camp or have foraging duty. The conversations over these meager meals aren't about strategy or glory, but about the quality of the hardtack, the unfair distribution of water, or who got the worst spot to sleep last night. Shared misery, you learn quickly, is the most common currency in a mercenary camp. A wry look exchanged over a particularly flavorless bite of food speaks volumes, and then there are the irritations, always the irritations. In warmer weather, the flies seem determined to land on every exposed patch of skin and crawl into every bit of food. In the damp, it's the persistent chill that no amount of wool seems to ward off completely, or the way the mud seems to stick to absolutely everything. Even the simple act of finding a private spot away from hundreds of eyes, requires a little strategic planning. There are strange habits and beliefs that sprout up in these close quarters, too. You've heard some of the older hands swear by keeping a small, smooth stone in their boot, claiming it wards off blisters and evil spirits alike. Or the strict, unspoken rule some units have about which way you point your boots when you sleep, always away from the center of the camp, apparently, so your spirit doesn't wander off in the night. You don't know if there's anything to it, but after enough cold, uncomfortable nights, you find yourself vaguely adhering to them anyway. Can't hurt, right? This is the bulk of the life you realize. Not the charge, not the clash, but this. The waiting, the fixing, the enduring of small discomforts, and the quiet camaraderie born of shared boredom. It's 1,000 tiny, unglamorous tasks that fill the hours, a constant, low-level hum of just being here. The stories told later will focus on the moments of sharp, brutal action. But the truth is, most of your time is spent simply existing in this temporary, transient home. But this quiet waiting wouldn't last forever. Soon the road would call. The word ripples through the camp, a subtle shift in the air, a different kind of murmur. Someone important has arrived, or a runner with a message has reached the leaders. This is it, the potential contract. For you, down at the bottom of the hierarchy, the specifics often come through a chain of increasingly rougher-looking individuals. It's rarely a formal, sit-down affair, more like a huddle around a map scratched in the dirt, or whispered instructions passed down from a man with slightly cleaner boots than yours. How did you even get this potential job? It wasn't like there was a signpost saying, "Mercenaries wanted here." Maybe you were part of a band that just finished a job and was looking for the next, drifting towards a region known for needing muscle. Maybe you heard a rumor in a roadside tavern, a whisper about a minor lord expecting trouble, or a city-state bracing for a siege. Often, it's about being in the right place at the right time and having a reputation, however small, that precedes you, hopefully for effectiveness, and not just for excessive property damage when bored. Your employers come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes it's a nervous merchant caravan leader, clutching his purse and looking at your scarred faces like you're slightly less predictable wild animals. He just needs safe passage through dangerous territory, plain and simple. Other times, it's a minor noble trying to settle a border dispute with his equally ambitious cousin, or a slightly larger city trying to assert its dominance over a neighbor without depleting its own citizen militia, who, frankly, would rather be farming or trading. Very occasionally, you might even get hired by a king or a major power, though those jobs usually come with bigger risks and are snatched up by the larger, more established mercenary companies. These people need you because they often don't have standing armies trained for sustained conflict. Their farmers and shopkeepers make decent temporary soldiers in a pinch, but they'd rather get back to farming and shopkeeping as soon as possible. You asterisk, on the other hand, this is your trade. You might not be fighting for your homeland or a glorious ideal, but you are hopefully good at the fighting part. You're a professional in your own dirty, uncomfortable way. The negotiation, if you were privy to it, or as it filters down to you, focuses on the essentials. How many bodies are needed, for how long, and crucially, how much coin? It's a tense dance. The employer wants to pay as little as possible. Your leader wants to get enough to keep the men fed, armed, and reasonably content, which mostly means getting paid. Terms might include provisions, the right to a certain amount of plunder, which is a polite word for legalized theft, or even land sometimes, though that's rare and usually a sign of a very important client. But here's the constant, buzzing anxiety that underlies every agreement. Payment isn't guaranteed. You could march for weeks, fight hard, risk your life, and then the employer might suddenly find their coffers empty or decide your services weren't quite worth the agreed-upon price, or simply figure they don't need you anymore, and keeping the coin is easier than paying you. This wasn't just a possibility. It was a regular hazard of the job throughout history. Imagine, if you will, the Carthaginians after their long war with Rome. They had relied heavily on hired soldiers, but the war indemnity Rome demanded left Carthage broke. Their response, not paying the mercenaries. The result was a brutal conflict known simply as the Mercenary War, where the unpaid troops turned on their former employers. Or consider the troops of Emperor Charles V centuries later. When unpaid, they didn't just grumble, they marched on and brutally sacked the city of Rome itself in 1527. Philip II's unpaid soldiers likewise plundered Antwerp, a major economic center. Knowing this history, even vaguely, adds a layer of profound unease to the signing of any contract. You could do everything right, fulfill your end of the bargain perfectly, but if the employer can't or won't pay, your skills, your risk, your very survival could be for nothing. It makes you look at the person signing the agreement, whether they are a grand noble or a sweating merchant, with a calculating, wary eye. Will their coin be good, or will you simply be trading your sweat and blood for another empty promise? The contract is signed, the deal is struck, and now comes the part that wears you down, mile after mile, and with the contract agreed, you knew the waiting was truly over. Soon the road would call. The order comes, sometimes with a shouted command, sometimes with a simple gesture from the front. The camp stirs, gear is quickly or not so quickly bundled, and the column starts to form. There's a shuffling, clanking sound as hundreds of armed bodies begin to move in unison. And then, you're walking. The first hour isn't so bad. The morning air might still be cool, and there's a faint sense of purpose, of finally doing something after the waiting. But soon the rhythm asserts itself. Left foot, right foot. The swing of your arms, slightly off balance because of the weight you carry. The constant pressure of your boots against the ground, hardening from camp earth to trail dirt or rough stone. Your pack settles onto your back, a solid, unyielding weight that becomes an extension of yourself. This is the true work of the ancient mercenary, walking, day after day, along roads that were rarely smooth and paved like modern highways. Think more along the lines of well-worn tracks, muddy paths, or trails carved by generations of footsteps and cartwheels. You walk through open fields, where the sun beats down with relentless intensity or rain turns the ground into a sucking bog. You walk through forests, where the air is cooler and smells of damp leaves and pine needles, but roots and rocks constantly threaten to trip you. You walk along rivers, the sound of flowing water a constant, tantalizing reminder of thirst. The pace is dictated by the group, and it's never fast. Imagine walking 8 miles in a day. That might not sound like much now, maybe a couple of hours of brisk walking for someone unencumbered. but do it carrying 30, 40, maybe even 50 pounds of gear, armor, weapons, food, a blanket, a few personal items. Do it for hours on end, under the ancient sun or through chilling rain. That 8 miles becomes a long, grinding effort. If you were marching from, say, ancient Rome to Naples, a distance of roughly 120 miles, it would take you a solid 15 days of marching like this, minimum, assuming the roads were decent and nothing went wrong. That's 2 weeks of constant, physical exertion before you even got to where you were going. Multiply that for longer journeys across whole regions or even empires. The scale of travel back then was immense, measured not in hours, but in weeks and months of putting one foot in front of the other. The landscape changes, but slowly. So slowly, in fact, that sometimes you feel like you're simply walking in place. A distant hill takes half a day to approach, loom over you, and then slowly recede behind you. The trees change subtly, the type of stone underfoot shifts, the birdsong sounds a little different. These small variations become the landmarks of your days, tiny markers of progress. You see other people on the road, too. Farmers working fields near villages, straightening up to watch the mercenary band pass with wary eyes. Small groups of merchants, looking nervous but trying to appear confident. Sometimes you might encounter other military units, perhaps the local Lord's Guard or another mercenary company heading in a different direction. There's usually a brief, tense assessment of each other, a silent question of whether they are friend, foe, or just fellow travelers on a harsh road. The sounds are the sounds of the march. The collective trudge of feet, the creak of leather, the jingle of metal, the occasional cough or sigh. Orders are sometimes passed down, shouted from the front, but mostly it's just the steady, rhythmic progress. The smell is a mix of dust, sweat, unwashed wool, and the ever-present scent of the natural world around you: cut grass, damp earth, pine resin, sometimes the distant smell of wood smoke from a village you won't stop in. This isn't glamorous. It's tiring, it's monotonous. Your feet ache, your shoulders burn, and your mind can drift into a hazy state of semi-consciousness, focused only on the next step and the step after that. But there is also a strange comfort in the rhythm, in being part of a larger body moving with a singular, if externally imposed purpose. You are simply moving, covering distance, getting closer to wherever you're supposed to be. And for now, that is enough. You're deep in the rhythm now, left foot, right foot. The dust kicks up around your worn boots, fine and gritty, coating your greaves and the hem of your tunic. Your mind is half empty, focused only on the mechanics of moving forward. The sun, high overhead, beats down, warm on your shoulders through the leather. The landscape is open here, rolling hills covered in dry grass, a few scrubby trees dotting the slopes. The column stretches out ahead and behind you, a long, segmented serpent of weary bodies. Then a ripple goes through the line ahead. A hand shoots up. The pace falters, stops. A silence falls, sudden and heavy, broken only by the panting of exertion and the buzzing of flies in the heat. You strain your eyes, looking forward. Up ahead, where the track curves around a cluster of large boulders, something is different. Figures. Standing still, your hand is on the grip of your spear before you even consciously decide to move it. It's a reflex honed by necessity. The worn wood feels familiar, a comforting weight. Your heart gives a sudden, hard thud against your ribs, a startled bird trapped in your chest. The weariness of the march vanishes in an instant, replaced by a sharp, prickling awareness that shoots up your spine. Adrenaline, ancient and potent, you squint, trying to make them out. How many? Are they armed? Who are they? The light seems to glint off metal up there. Your breath catches in your throat. Around you, others are doing the same, gripping weapons, adjusting shields, eyes fixed forward. The quiet camp sounds and the rhythm of the march are a distant memory. Now there is only this moment. This stillness charged with potential energy. They haven't moved either. A standoff. Are they bandits? A rival company? The local lord's men come to demand a toll. Your mind races through possibilities, trying to read the shapes, the distance, the angle of the light. Every muscle in your body feels coiled, ready to move, to brace, to react. The dry grass, the boulders, the clear sky above, they seem suddenly sharper, more intensely real. The world has narrowed down to this single point of potential conflict. You can hear the sharp, low commands being passed up the line, hushed but urgent. Your leader is trying to assess the situation, figure out who they are and what they want. The sweat feels cold now on your skin, despite the heat. You scan their formation, their stance. Are they defensive, aggressive, waiting? Your eyes dart back and forth, taking in every small detail you can glean from this distance. This is what they pay you for, not just the fighting, but this moment before the fighting. The tension, the assessment, the readiness. The willingness to stand here, heart hammering, uncertain of what the next few breaths will bring. The long, boring miles, the uncomfortable nights, the bad food, it all leads to moments like this, where everything could change in the space of a few heartbeats. The air vibrates with unspoken questions, and the potential for sudden violence in the stillness that followed. The true cost of the coin began to become clear. Okay, the tension hung in the air, thick and heavy. Your hand was on your weapon, heart pounding. What happened next? Sometimes it's a sudden, violent release of that tension, a shouted challenge, the thud of bodies, the sharp, tearing sound of metal on. Things you'd rather not dwell on. Other times, less dramatically, after a long, silent assessment, one side might slowly, cautiously back down, or a recognized banner is seen, revealing them as allies or simply another group with no quarrel. Let's imagine the tension breaks, not necessarily into a full, chaotic battle, but a sharp, brutal exchange. A brief, intense flurry of activity where the world dissolves into immediate threats and reactions. Then, as quickly as it began, it's over. The opposing figures are gone, fled, or dealt with. The air is no longer alive with anticipation, but filled with a different kind of silence, punctuated by ragged breaths and the groans of the injured. The first thing you notice is the sheer physical feeling of the adrenaline draining away. Your hands, which moments ago gripped your spear with unnatural strength, might start to tremble uncontrollably. Your knees feel weak. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, as if you've just run a great distance, even if you barely moved 10 feet. The world, which had been reduced to that single point of danger, slowly expands again, revealing the familiar details of the landscape, looking somehow different now, tainted by what just happened. You look around. See who is standing, who is not. There's a quiet assessment amongst your companions, a quick check, are you all right? A nod, a grunt, maybe a hand clapped on a shoulder. There are wounds to tend to thankfully, maybe just cuts and bruises this time, or perhaps something worse that brings a somber hush to the group. The shared experience, however brief, forges a temporary bond, a silent acknowledgement that you faced something together and for now survived. Then come the necessary, mundane tasks that follow any such encounter. Weapons need cleaning again, wiped free of whatever got on them. Armor needs a quick check for new damage. The injured, even lightly, need looking after, a torn strip of cloth for a bandage, a share of precious water. If there were casualties, there's the grim, quiet work of dealing with the bodies, a task that is never easy, no matter how many times you've seen it. It's done with few words, just the sounds of effort and the silent weight of mortality. You find a place to sit for a moment, leaning back against those same boulders that moments ago seemed so menacing. You feel the rough stone through your tunic. The sun still beats down, indifferent. The flies are back, buzzing around. The thirst is intense now. You take a long drink from your water skin, the lukewarm liquid feeling like the greatest luxury imaginable. In these quiet moments, the questions can sometimes creep in, unwelcome. Was it worth it, that sudden spike of terror, the risk, the lingering unease? Was the promise of coin enough to balance that? You push the thought away. It doesn't help to dwell. This is the life. This is what you trade your time, your safety, your peace for, and the bonds formed here in these shared moments of stress or danger are strange things. Intense in the moment, a reliance on the person fighting next to you. But often they are temporary. This isn't a family or a community built on shared history and mutual care that lasts a lifetime. It's a collection of individuals brought together by a contract, bound by shared risk and the hope of payment. When the contract ends, you might never see these faces again. They'll drift to the next job and you to yours. The camaraderie is real in the moment, forged in fire, or at least the threat of it, but it often doesn't extend much beyond the current shared path. It's a brotherhood of the road, transient and fragile, so you sit, you tend to what needs tending, and you wait for the order to march again. The tension has broken, the immediate threat is gone, but the fundamental precariousness of your life remains, and in the stillness that followed, the true cost of the coin began to become clear. After days, maybe weeks, more of marching, the landscape starts to subtly shift again. The type of trees changes, the shape of the hills softens or grows more rugged, the stone underfoot takes on a different hue. And then you start encountering signs of a different culture. The style of the farmhouses is unfamiliar. The clothing of the occasional traveler you pass is distinct. The markers on the side of the road are carved with symbols you don't recognize. You are undeniably somewhere new, entering the town or city of your new employer feels off-kilter. It's not hostile necessarily, but there's a palpable sense of being an outsider. The architecture is strange to your eyes. Maybe the roofs are steeper, the walls built of different materials, the doorways shaped oddly. The language spoken in the bustling marketplace around the edges of your column sounds like a rapid, incomprehensible stream of sounds, the words bouncing off you without meaning. Even the smells are different, unfamiliar spices from the food stalls, different types of incense burning near the small shrines, the unique aroma of their local crafts. You see faces turn as your group marches through. Curiosity, certainly, but also a touch of wariness. You represent disruption, potential trouble, even if you're supposedly on their side. You're the hired muscle, the necessary but slightly distasteful presence. You feel their eyes on your worn gear, your unfamiliar faces. You are the others. Navigating simple things becomes a challenge. Buying a loaf of bread involves pointing and holding out coins, hoping you've offered the right amount in the local currency, whose value feels entirely arbitrary compared to what you're used to. A simple question about finding water might be met with blank stares or rapid-fire responses you can't understand. You rely on your leader, or maybe one or two individuals in your company who have been here before or have a knack for picking up languages, to bridge the gap, and the customs. They are perhaps the strangest part. Little things you take for granted are done completely differently here. You might notice that people always walk around a certain fountain clockwise, or that they tie strips of colored cloth to specific trees outside the town gates. There are hushed whispers about local spirits or gods you've never heard of, beings who apparently have very particular demands about how you behave near certain landmarks or at certain times of day. You hear about a belief here that you should never, ever step on a discarded bread crust. Apparently, it's considered deeply unlucky, possibly angering some minor household deity connected to the hearth and food. Stepping on one is said to bring misfortune, or perhaps even cause your next meal to turn instantly sour in your mouth. You saw a local sidestep carefully around a tiny crumb on the path earlier, giving it a wide berth, their face etched with quiet reverence, or perhaps just ingrained habit. It seems utterly bizarre to you, a mercenary who's eaten things that would make a goat recoil, but you file it away. Can't hurt to avoid the bread crumbs, just in case. You're already dealing with enough uncertainty. You also pick up another small, practical tip, though it feels almost like folk wisdom. One of the older mercs, who's traveled these lands before, shows you how the locals use a particular type of fragrant leaf, crushed and rubbed on exposed skin, to ward off the biting insects that are particularly vicious in this region during the evenings. It smells strong, a bit like bitter herbs and smoke, but you're willing to try anything to avoid another night covered in itchy red welts. Being a mercenary gives you a strange, fleeting glimpse into 100 different ways of life. You pass through regions with vastly different histories, traditions, and ways of seeing the world. You see grand cities and humble villages, people who worship sun gods or river spirits, societies ruled by kings, councils, or wealthy merchants. Your own life is one of constant movement, without deep roots anywhere, but because of that, you are a quiet observer of the incredible diversity of the ancient world. You carry within you a patchwork of customs, strange phrases, and little tips for survival picked up from places you might only see once. But despite the novelty, the underlying reality is the same. You are here to do a job, to earn your coin, and for now, that means adapting, watching, and trying not to accidentally offend any local deities by stepping on their sacred bread crumbs. And as the days blurred together in this new place, you began to wonder if the journey home would ever truly begin. The initial novelty of the new place begins to wear off. You're stationed maybe just outside the town walls, or perhaps billeted in less than comfortable temporary housing within the city itself. The days here start to feel much like the days in the last place, before the march began. There are patrols to be done, yes, watching the roads, looking for the trouble you were hired to prevent or confront. There's training to keep skills sharp, practicing maneuvers that feel both essential and utterly pointless when you're just standing around. There's the endless maintenance of gear, sharpening blades, mending armor, patching boots again. The rhythm is slow, punctuated by false alarms or the occasional minor task assigned by your new employers. But the main activity, the one that occupies everyone's thoughts whether spoken aloud or not, is waiting. Waiting for the order to truly do something, waiting for the situation to escalate, but most pressingly, waiting for the payment. The reason you are here, enduring the boredom, the discomfort, and the underlying risk. The contract was agreed upon, the terms set, but the actual transfer of coin from their hands to yours, that's a moment fraught with anxiety. Rumors start to circulate through the ranks like a sickness. They're short on funds, the treasury is empty, the war or the trade dispute or the siege is costing them more than they thought. They think we haven't done enough yet to earn the full amount. You hear whispers that the leaders of your company are in tense meetings with the employer's representatives. There are arguments over clauses in the contract, disputes about what constitutes completion of the job, haggling over deductions for supplies or alleged damages. You, meanwhile, can only watch and wait, the knots in your stomach tightening with each passing day the payment doesn't materialize. This wasn't just bad luck for a few mercenary bands. It was a systemic issue in the ancient and medieval worlds. Raising and maintaining an army, even a temporary one of hired soldiers, was incredibly expensive. Think about the sheer logistics and cost involved. Feeding hundreds or thousands of people every day, arming them, paying their wages, replacing lost or damaged gear. Rulers and cities often hired mercenaries because they needed trained fighters quickly for a specific threat, but they frequently underestimated the long-term financial burden. Promises were made based on anticipated revenues, taxes, plunder from conquests, trade profits, that didn't always pan out. When faced with a shortfall, employers had a strong temptation to simply not pay their hired troops or to pay them less than agreed. After all, what could a band of landless, rootless soldiers do about it? Well, history provides some rather uncomfortable answers. As mentioned before, unpaid mercenaries could become incredibly dangerous to their former employers. The sack of Rome in 1527 by the unpaid troops of Charles V wasn't a planned conquest. It was a mutiny, an explosion of violence and plunder fueled by resentment and lack of payment. Likewise, the brutal mercenary war against Carthage was a direct consequence of the Punic state's inability or unwillingness to pay its foreign soldiers after the First Punic War. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a recurring nightmare for ancient and medieval powers who relied on hired muscle, knowing, even intuitively, that this had happened before, that powerful employers had simply shrugged and decided not to pay, adds a sharp edge to your anxiety. You discussed the terms, you endured the march, you faced down that unexpected encounter on the road, you've been standing guard and waiting. And for what? An empty promise. The tension spreads through your own ranks. Some men become sullen and resentful, grumbling constantly. Others grow restless, their eyes scanning the town walls or the employer's palace with a new, calculating look. Arguments flare up over minor things, the real frustration boiling just beneath the surface. Your leaders try to maintain discipline, but their authority is tied to the promise of coin, and if that promise seems hollow, their control weakens. Who do you trust? The employer, who holds the purse strings but seems increasingly evasive. Your own leaders, who might be trying their best but are ultimately powerless if the money isn't there. Or yourself and the few men you know you can rely on if things go truly sour. You feel the familiar weight of your gear, but now it feels different. It's not just protection, it's your only leverage. Your skills, your willingness to fight, that's what they paid for. But if they don't honor their end, those same skills could become a weapon turned back on them. A terrifying prospect you try not to dwell on too much. For now, there is just the waiting, the rumors, and the gnawing uncertainty about whether the coin you risked your life for will ever actually reach your hand. And as the days blurred together, you began to wonder if the journey home would ever truly begin. There's a different kind of energy in the air now, not the charged tension of waiting for a fight or the anxious stillness of waiting for pay, but the restless anticipation of departure. Gear is packed with a speed born of long practice. Lingering looks are cast back at the town or camp that has been your temporary world. There's a sense of relief for some, a quiet satisfaction if the job was completed, and the coin, or at least some coin, is in your purse. For others, there might be resentment, frustration, or simply weariness if things didn't go well or the pay was short. And then you're walking again, back out onto the road that brought you here. Left foot, right foot. The familiar rhythm asserts itself, but it feels different this time. The physical weariness is deeper now, a cumulative exhaustion from months of marching, waiting, and the brief, sharp bursts of effort or fear. Your muscles ache in a way that feels permanent, a dull throb beneath the surface. The dust seems thicker, the sun hotter, the cold sharper. Everything feels a little more extreme when you're simply putting distance between yourself and the last job, without the immediate goal of arrival driving you forward. The landscape, which you saw on the way in, looks different on the way out. The hills you climbed now seem steeper when you descend them. The rivers you crossed look wider. Places that held the tension of a potential ambush on the way in now just seem like places. You notice details you missed before, the color of the wildflowers growing by the track, the shape of a distant mountain peak, the way the light falls on the land in the late afternoon. Your eyes are seeing the world, not just scanning it for threats. Where are you going? That's the question that hangs in the air, unspoken or debated in low tones amongst the men. For a very few, if the contract went exceptionally well and they managed to save a bit of coin, maybe there is a thought of going home, though for many, home is a concept that exists more in memory or dreams than in reality. Perhaps a distant village you left years ago, where family might still live. But even that journey requires coin, and often the skills you have aren't needed in a quiet farming village. For most, the destination is simply somewhere else, somewhere there might be another contract. You'll head towards a region known for conflict, or towards a major city where news and rumors gather, hoping to hear about a lord needing guards, a caravan needing escort, or a city bracing for trouble. It's a constant search, a perpetual state of being between jobs. You are always moving towards the next possibility, the next chance to trade your strength and your risk for coin. This is the cycle of the mercenary life. Arrival, waiting, perhaps a brief, intense moment, then the wait for payment, and finally departure. A constant state of transience. You don't build a farm, you don't open a shop, you don't have neighbors you've known your whole life. Your connections are temporary, forged in the heat of the moment, and then often dissolving like mist when the shared path diverges. Your home is the road, the camp, the temporary billets, defined more by the people you are currently with than by any fixed location. There's a certain freedom in that, perhaps. You are bound by contracts, yes, but not by land or strong social ties. You see more of the world than most people in the ancient era ever would. You witness different cultures, different landscapes, different ways of life. You carry the knowledge of those miles in your bones, the taste of different waters on your tongue, the memory of countless sunrises and sunsets seen from 100 different vantage points. But there's also a profound rootlessness. A sense that you don't truly belong anywhere. You are a tool for hire, welcomed nervously when needed, and often dismissed coolly when you are not. Your loyalties are, by definition, temporary, tied to the coin, not to a cause or a people. It's a lonely path in its own way, even when surrounded by hundreds of other men just like you. You are together on the road, but each of you is ultimately walking your own solitary path towards an uncertain future. And as the days blurred together on this new leg of the journey, you continue to wonder, perhaps with a little less hope now, if the journey home would ever truly begin. The rhythm of the march continues, a soft, familiar cadence on whatever ground lies beneath your worn boots now. The landscape changes, the sun rises and sets, the stars wheel overhead through countless nights on the road or in makeshift camps. This has been the shape of your life, movement punctuated by periods of intense, often uncomfortable, stillness. Looking back down the long, dusty path you've traveled, what does it all amount to? You feel the familiar weight of your gear, lighter perhaps than it was when you started, worn down by the miles just as you are. The rough fabric of your tunic against your skin, the ache in your shoulders at the end of a long day, the taste of dust and sweat, these are the constant companions of this life. You remember the smell of wood smoke and stale bread, the sharp tang of fear, the unexpected sweetness of clean water on a hot day. These small, potent sensations are carved into your memory more deeply than the names of the places you've been or the people you've fought for. You weren't a king's champion, not a legendary hero of myth. You were a working man, selling the only real skill you possessed, the willingness and ability to face danger and hardship for coin. Your loyalty wasn't to a flag or a crown, but to the terms of a contract, however precarious that contract might be. It was a practical transaction, a way to survive in a world that offered few other clear paths for someone like you. Think about it. Even today, centuries later, there are echoes of this ancient life. People who move from city to city for work, following contracts that last for months instead of years. Individuals piecing together a living from different temporary jobs, constantly seeking the next opportunity without the stability of a single, long-term employer or a fixed community. They sell their skills, their time, their expertise, much like you sold your strength and your willingness to stand on the edge of danger. The tools are different, the risks perhaps less immediately physical, though uncertainty has its own kind of danger, but the underlying pattern, the transient life, the search for security through temporary arrangements feels strangely familiar. Perhaps the true coin earned on this journey wasn't just the silver or bronze that occasionally filled your purse. Maybe it was the resilience forged in the long marches and the tense waits. The stark, clear-eyed view of the world gained from seeing it from the outside, always moving through, never truly belonging. The quiet understanding of human nature that comes from relying on, and being relied upon by, strangers in moments of crisis, and then parting ways when the crisis is over. You saw the world in its raw, unvarnished state, the beauty of a sunrise over wild country, the harshness of a storm on an exposed road, the strange customs of distant peoples, the simple, universal human needs for food, shelter, and a measure of safety. You learn to read the weather, the terrain, and the subtle shifts in the mood of the people around you. Skills that kept you alive day after weary day. The road stretches on, yes. There will be more marches, more waits, more uncertain encounters. But there will also be more quiet nights under the stars, more dawns breaking over new landscapes, more moments of shared silence or quiet conversation with fellow travelers who understand this unique, strange way of life. You carry the weight of the miles in your body, the lessons of the road in your mind, and the quiet knowledge that you have faced the world on its own terms. One step at a time. It was a life of selling your strength, your courage, your presence in dangerous places. It was often uncomfortable, frequently uncertain, and rarely glorious, but it was your path. And in the quiet of this moment, looking out at the path ahead, you can find a strange, quiet acceptance in that simple truth. The journey continues. We've walked many miles together tonight, through dust and damp and moments of unexpected tension. I hope this quiet journey through the life of an ancient mercenary has offered you a moment of relaxation, a different perspective, and perhaps a gentle reminder that even the most unexpected lives have their own rhythm and quiet truths. If you enjoyed this journey, maybe take a moment to leave a like and consider subscribing. It helps these quiet stories find their way to others. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. For now, the path ahead is quiet. Sleep well, and I'll see you on the next journey. Good night.